Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on Swish City. I'm your host, Bruce Veliz, and in today's episode, we're diving in and exploring the Detroit Pistons as we break down every single team gearing up to the 25-2026 NBA season, looking at their off-season, breaking it down, and then giving my season preview, going over where I think the Pistons will fall in this newly slated Eastern Conference. If you guys have enjoyed the videos here on the channel, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Like I said, we are trying to get to every single team before the start of the year. The season starts just in a couple of days, and that means that we're going to be on the grind getting every single team out. So if you want to make sure you stay up to date on everything, hit the subscribe button, and without further ado, let's dive in and let's talk about the Pistons. So the Detroit Pistons are a very fun and interesting team, as just 2 seasons ago they had the longest record in sports history of not getting a win with consecutive games, and then seemingly made the playoffs, were the 6th seed, and almost won the first round playoff matchup versus the New York Knicks if they didn't run into injuries. And that internal growth has been sprouting in Detroit here these last couple of seasons, and once again, do I think it's going to continue to grow as we do see them make some marginal moves here on the edges, not really making too many difference makers, but ultimately, I do think strengthening their roster and bringing them to be at least a little bit more competitive here in this Eastern Conference. And specifically with this conference getting a little bit weaker, I do think that this could be a season for the Pistons to really take that next step and put themselves into these type of conversations in this conference to be at the top of it for the next couple of years. So without further ado, let's go over the additions, the subtractions, and what went down with the Pistons this offseason. First, looking at the additions and who they brought in. They brought in 3 players here for the offseason via free agency, one of them being Javonte Green, a player who has played the last couple of years with the Cleveland Cavaliers, Chicago Bulls, has spent some time with the Boston Celtics in the past as well, playing as a two-way player and fringe rotational guy. In my personal opinion, Green is just a serviceable plug-and-play player who can play multiple positions, mainly playing the 2, 3, and 4 as an effective defender, someone who doesn't need the ball in their hands to be effective as a scorer and a solid slasher as well. I think he does provide some great additional depth for the defensive end and for a Pistons team that has some of these kind of combo wings and guys like Stuart Thompson already. I think Javonte Green is going to be a perfect fit to kind of similarly play that Swiss Army knife role that the Pistons already have entangled into their roster. They also brought in Caris LeVert after obviously losing some valuable shooting this offseason. The Pistons still want to have those creative scorers on the wing for Cade Cunningham, and they go and get Caris LeVert. Now, LeVert is a little bit more of a shot creator and someone that's going to create his own shot comparative to being more of a catch-and-shoot scorer or someone that's going to sit on the perimeter. So maybe not be the perfect fit ultimately, but I do think LeVert, in some instances where either Ivy is on the bench or Cade Cunningham needs some rest, can create some offense for this Pistons team for them, but also being a solid spacer and catch-and-shoot scorer for this team when those ball-dominant players are on the floor. Now, we could see an opportunity where LeVert doesn't really fit, and that results in a trade throughout the season, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But LeVert is one of the nice signings that the Pistons did make. And then lastly, they brought in Colby Jones from the Washington Wizards. He was traded from the Wizards to the Oklahoma City Thunder basically around the draft or after the draft due to the fact that the Thunder were over the roster limit. They needed to trade someone. They traded Dylan Jones for Colby Jones. Colby Jones was waived by the Thunder. They ultimately didn't need him. For the Wizards, he didn't really pan out, coming out of, I believe, Xavier, playing over at being drafted to the Kings. He now is competing on a 2-way deal with the Pistons, trying to get another guaranteed roster spot alongside the guys in Dennis Jenkins and Tulu Smith III for those 3 2-way players for the Pistons squad. Next, let's dive into who they traded for, as they made one trade, and it was Duncan Robinson, a sign-in trade, getting rid of Simon Fontecchio, which we'll go over why Fontecchio was ultimately replaced, but Robinson, I think, is going to be a nice addition for this Pistons team, giving them some great floor spacing, another shooter on the wing, and someone over these last couple seasons has looked pretty solid. I know last year had some really good shooting splits for the Miami Heat, and I think is getting more comfortable in this role. I think for the Heat, him also being alongside Tyler Hero and them being so offensively minded and not having those defensive plug-and-play pieces was a little hindering, and I think for Duncan Robinson, being able to play alongside guys like Azor Thompson, Tobias Harris, Jalen Durant, Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, players that can be effective defenders, even Javonte Green. I do think he's going to look like a better fit for this team, not be as required or on the defensive end. Yes, you still get hunted on the defensive end by other opponents, but I do think he'll be able to be a little bit of a better fit for the Pistons than he was with the Heat. And then lastly, the Pistons made one draft selection. It was in the second round where they drafted Chaz Lanier. They've had some success drafting late here in past seasons, picking up Marcus Sasser just 2 seasons ago as I believe, either late first round pick or an early second round pick. They were involved with the Celtics moving back for Jordan Walsh. I don't really remember where Sasser was originally drafted, but he was a late draft pick in late first round, early second rounder, and actually panned out to be pretty effective for this Pistons team, even getting into some competition battles with Ivy and Cade Cunningham a couple of seasons ago of being someone that could play some of that backup point guard role. So that's why he is still on this roster and still a key piece. And Lanier, coming from Tennessee, was one of the better catch and shoot scorers and offensive creators for those units. So ultimately bringing him in, I think, is just another way of adding some catch and shoot scoring through the youth movement, but also looking to replace some guys that they did lose this offseason for the next couple of years to not only help now, but also help for the future. When some of these contracts do get expensive, they do have some of those rookie contracts to maybe fall back on to extend to be valuable depth pieces when other guys get priced out. So ultimately, that's where the Pistons go in their additions on the offseason. So now let's dive in and talk about who the Pistons ultimately lost this offseason as well. So the Pistons did lose a lot of players this offseason. Not some that you could say definitely were vital pieces to their team, but also some that I don't necessarily think were as vital. And I think some of these other young players kind of going up the ranks will be able to fill in those voids pretty solidly. So ultimately, they lose 4 players here in free agency. The first being Tim Hardaway Jr., where he goes and signs the veteran minimum contract with the Denver Nuggets. Honestly, with having the young guard room here with Marcus Sasser growing and Jaden Ivey, which we'll get into a little bit later, but with him being out for a majority of the season last year, they still want to see that growth kind of come in and play and still need a role for him. So losing kind of one of these guards or multiple of these guards was going to be the case here for the Pistons here. Hardaway Jr. ultimately gets basically replaced by Caris LeVert and Chaz Lanier, and still needing that group development with Jaden Ivey to see how well he can pan out to either utilize him as a key point for this offense or to use him as a trade piece. Hardaway, though, was a solid scorer for the Pistons, specifically in the playoffs where he came alive, having some big games for them versus the New York Knicks, and someone that I think is going to be a great scorer on the wing for Nikola Jokic, specifically as a, just a depth bench piece for them, as they seemingly didn't have as much depth over these last couple of years. Next, Dennis Schroeder also left. He went to the Sacramento Kings to go be their starting point guard, but he was a great addition for this Pistons team, specifically in that second half of the year. Once, obviously, Jaden Ivey went down, he was obviously the backup point guard for this team. Really stepped up and delivered as that veteran presence, being able to initiate the offense, control it, but also being able to distribute and help out the other players as well within this team. I do think he will be a big loss, but like I mentioned, if Jaden Ivey can take that rise that the Pistons do see him being, I don't necessarily think that Dennis Schroeder was as needed within this team, as they would just be stunting the growth of some of their other younger players. And then lastly, the 2 other guys that left in free agency, some of the more, end of the spectrum or lower end of the rotation guys for this team would be Lindy Waters III and Ron Harper Jr. Lindy Waters III basically goes to the San Antonio Spurs to go be another combo defensive wing. They ultimately replace him with Javonte Green in that role, and then Ron Harper Jr., who was on a 2-way contract with this team, ultimately gets replaced by Kobe Jones, a former first-round pick, someone that has some upside potential but hasn't been able to live it. Playing with teams like the Wizards and the Kings, the Pistons are taking that investment and hoping that Jones can once again get into a standard contract and be a vital piece for this team, in giving up Ron Harper Jr., who goes to the Boston Celtics. He ultimately got a 2-way contract with them as well, as after they waived RJ Lewis, they converted Ron Harper to that final 2-way spot, and Harper has had some time with Boston in the past, as he had previously played there before he went to the Pistons. It's kind of weird. Harper Jr. was on the main Celtics playing for them. The Pistons saw him playing good, and they saw the Celtics didn't have a 2-way spot to give him. So they ultimately pried him away from the Celtics, giving him an open 2-way spot. He said yes, joined the team, played there, looked solid. And then this past season, they said, okay, we don't need you anymore. We'll bring Kobe Jones in. And the Celtics said, hey, we have an open 2-way spot. You looked good last year. You can come into our training camp. You look good in our training camp, even in our preseason. Come play with us and actually get the 2-way spot you should deserve the last season that we couldn't give you. And I think it's an overall great arcing story for Ron Harper Jr., getting that full cycle treatment, getting back to Boston, and getting what he should have gotten more of in Detroit, that availability to play. So I do think we'll see some nice growth with him, possibly mainly playing more with the main Celtics, but even with the Celtics dealing with some injuries, we could see him getting some burn within that actual rotation. And then going over who the Pistons traded, they let go of Simone Fontecchio, who I think was a solid catch-and-shoot scoring wing for them, a versatile wing, but ultimately one that they didn't need. I do think that Duncan Robinson is a better scorer and better offensive product than Simone Fontecchio is, more consistent on that end, but also on the defensive end, even if Simone is a little bit better, I do think they have that size in those younger guys in Ron Holland Jr. or Ron Holland II, that I think is going to take a big leap this season as a lob threat working alongside Kane and Cunningham, but also Bobby Klintman as well. So I do really like this power forward room for the Pistons, and I do think by getting rid of Simone Fontecchio, it's not like they got rid of a player that they necessarily needed, because I do think younger guys in Holland and Klintman can kind of replace that value of Fontecchio while also adding the valuable shooting that Robinson does provide on that wing to replace guys like Hardaway Jr. and the next guy we're going to mention, and Malik Beasley. He obviously was supposed to get a deal with the Pistons. It was rumored to be like a 3-year, $14 million deal, so estimate roughly around $42 million for Malik Beasley coming into the offseason. But obviously, he had his issues with the betting scandal that currently was going on, and now the NBA is obviously doing ongoing their investigation. We'll have to see what this means for Malik Beasley. We obviously have seen in the past with betting stuff that with Jonte Porter, it hasn't been the greatest, obviously, repercussion for him. So with Malik Beasley, we are getting near some eerie waters. Now, obviously, if he beats the case, has nothing to worry about it. It obviously sucks that he had to go through that during this offseason, but I do think that with his ability to be a solid veteran scorer for the past 2 seasons with the Pistons and with the Bucks on those veteran minimum contracts, that a team with a roster spot will give Beasley that opportunity to be that catch-and-shoot scorer on the wing and valuable three-point guy, as he almost has, I think he led the league in three-point percentage at least one of the last 2 seasons, if not both of those 2 seasons, or at least at one point was. So you got to give credit to where it is due. Beasley has been proving that he could be a valuable scorer and solid starting shooting guard in the NBA, and I do think that if he is available, a team will sign him. It's just unfortunate the way that things went this offseason, regardless if he did it or not, that this is where it's kind of transcended into at this moment. But Beasley would be someone I would still keep an eye on. He's not unsigned because he is not good. But lastly, let's dive into the depth chart here, and let's go over my predictions as well for this Detroit Pistons team, as it's going to be a very, very fun season, I think, for them this year. So like I stated, I think this Pistons team is going to be very, very fun for a lot of reasons. But the main reason I think it's going to be is because of Cade Cunningham, the person that we've kind of avoided talking about so far, because obviously the Pistons haven't had to re-sign him or do anything like that this offseason. But Cunningham, I think, is really going to take that leap this year. We saw him, obviously, last year really rise to the occasion, being one of those dominating point guards in this league. And I feel like a lot of people, because of the Pistons' malpractice of their front office and understanding how they were building their team, really underestimated Cade Cunningham. And obviously Cade was dealing with some injuries as a younger player, obviously went to Oklahoma State, wasn't as he was prolific in college, but wasn't really as heightened to be for maybe the casual kind of aspect of it to be a top tier player, especially once he had to deal with some injuries. Because I know personally some friends were still low on Cade Cunningham going into last year, and I was like, guys, you need to realize that Cunningham hasn't had a full healthy season with an actual good coach, with an actual direction. This is going to be the opportunity where you see him grow, and we clearly saw that at every single level of the basketball floor. Defensively, he's an effective defender and can be solid. Playmaker, he can clearly help out his team in multiple aspects of the way of giving them the basket and making sure that he can control the offense. He can also score for himself from three-point range, from all 3 levels in the mid-range, also driving and attacking the basket. He is going to be one of the top-tier players in the Eastern Conference for some years to come. And I think this year, with Tyrese Halliburton being down as well, I think could be in the conversations for the best point guard in the Eastern Conference, rivaling a guy in Jalen Brunson, who obviously is at the top of those ranked with his insane offensive numbers. Then you obviously look down this list here and look at the starting 5 with Jaden Ivey, Asor Thompson, Tobias Harris, and Jalen Duran. I really do like this lineup here. That unfortunately for the Pistons, Ivey is going to be out for a month going into the season, so we'll have to keep an eye on that, still dealing with an injury this season like he similarly was last year. But guys like Marcus Sasser, Chaz Lanier, Karis LeVert will have to step up in those opportunities to really prove that they can be the vital parts for this team. The Pistons did not extend Ivey or Jalen Duran as well this offseason. which also can get into some possibilities of talking of trades down the line here with this Pistons team if this season does start going south due to injuries, or if it even does still start looking like it's going better than predicted and they can maybe take a leap by getting another star into this team. I know that Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren both have some value out there on the open market, and unfortunately for the both players, they've been inside of competition battles within some of these teams for their couple of years, and I do think the Pistons have some eyes on potentially moving off of them. But let's dive back into this rotation. Ausar Thompson is going to be playing that small forward position, arguably one of the better defenders in the draft. I can't believe people on social media will argue that Amen Thompson is a better defender than Ausar Thompson. I love Amen Thompson. He's really taken a leap. He's still a top-tier defender in the league. But Ausar coming into the draft, when you talked about both of these Thompson players, it was Amen as a 6'8" athlete that has the possibility to be a top-tier offensive player while also being a freak athlete and a crazy slasher, while also Ausar Thompson has that athletic ability, not the greatest on the offensive end, but is a lockdown defender. I don't understand how he can get that lost in translation. Maybe it's because Ausar hasn't played as much. Maybe it's because, once again, the Houston Rockets are this glamourifying case that everyone's peeling an eye on because of Kevin Durant and stuff like that. But Ausar Thompson is a better defender and is one of the better defenders, one of those key Swiss Army knife guys in this league, being able to play multiple positions, guard multiple sides, multiple positions as well, guards and bigs, and I think is going to be a vital piece for this Pistons defense in unlocking their ability to thrive, specifically with him and Ron Holland II. Lastly, Tobias Harris comes into this power forward position here, being that stretch four for this team. I think could be a veteran a veteran trade contract that the team does look to use if there's an option to upgrade at that position going into the year. But if not, I still think provides some solid spacing and scoring for this team as, that fourth, fifth option on a very, very comfortable contract within this team. I think finally, after we'd seen Tobias be on the Sixers and be on that absorbed contract, we would finally see him fit on a team that not only fits his play style, but also the contract looks relative to what he can produce, and I think that's great for Tobias Harris's value across the league itself. And then lastly, Jalen Duren, solid rebounder, solid rim protector, once again, still on a rookie scale deal, hasn't been extended yet, could be a possible trade candidate for this Pistons team as he has lacked a little bit on the defensive end there through these last couple of seasons. We'll have to see how that really translates going into this year. Then we look at this bench unit here when kind of breaking it down here. Obviously, I think Ivy will be playing some backup point guard, so I do think that he'll be working into this guard rotation, hence why it is the smallest one out of all of them. But I do think that Marcus Sasser will also get some big moments, specifically with Ivy being down to start the year. He's obviously been a solid defensive point guard coming out of Houston, and also is a solid effective playmaker for that secondary unit, being able to control the tempo of that team and set up some of these players here, which I think he'll be able to do pretty solidly. Then we look at Karis LeVert, who I also mentioned, kind of similar to Duncan Robinson, are going to be these spark plugs on offense here, plugging and playing within these starting units, but also coming in here for this bench unit and being those vital scorers for this team. Clearly, Ron Holland Jr., Isaiah Stewart are more defensive X factors for this squad, being those wing defenders and lob threats, but also shot blockers and rim deterrents within Isaiah Stewart there. So I do think LeVert and Duncan Robinson will be those offensive scorers, those plug-and-play pieces, the ones that you're going to need to get hot for this second unit to replace the guys like Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., Dennis Schroeder, and stuff like that to help off with the load from the stars putting up on the points like Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Tobias Harris. And then, like I mentioned, Holland II, keep calling him Holland Jr., and Isaiah Stewart, I do think are going to be vital pieces. Holland II is my key piece for the Pistons that I'm looking forward to this year. Him and Matas Buzelis, I don't want this to be forgotten, in last year's draft class, coming out of high school, were ranked number 1 and number 2 in the class. But since they went to the G League Ignite, since they didn't go to college, since they didn't get that bright exposure on them, they completely fell off the face of the earth, and it went 11th and 6th. And you're already seeing what Buzelis is doing right now for the Chicago Bulls. It is clear, it is evident that every team that did not pick on Matas Buzelis has screwed up. And I put the Bulls at 14th in my predictions. I think that's because they're going to trade and be ultimately bad. But ultimately now, when looking at it, I think Buzelis could take that team and maybe get them into the play-in with how good he is, or maybe alongside of Josh Giddey, with them being those two building blocks for the team that they already have found out for their future. And like Ron Holland, sorry to go on a tangent, but Buzelis is going to take that kind of similar leap, maybe not to that grand effect, because I don't think he's as dominant on the offensive end. He's obviously not the number 1 option on this team, but I do think is going to show that prowess to where he was deserving of being a top-tier wing for his complementary abilities of being a switchable defender, a lob threat, and someone that could be a solid rim protector as well. Similarly with Isaiah Stewart, he was someone that got injured throughout the playoffs last year versus the New York Knicks, which really limited the ability for the Pistons to win this series, because I do think if Isaiah Stewart stays healthy, that the Pistons do have a chance, if not definitely, win this series with his ability to really shun off Karl-Anthony Towns on the defensive end and to be that perfect rim deterrent, shot blocker, rim protector for this Pistons team, being able to not really also able to stretch the floor, hit some threes at some points. I really like Isaiah Stewart and what he can bring to this squad. And then lastly, looking at this tertiary unit, like I mentioned, Chaz Lanier going to be a scorer for this team, playing in some sporadic minutes coming as a rookie. Javonte Green being that switchable defender, kind of replacing that. Bobby Klintman seemingly going to kind of fill in for the Simone Fontecchio role, switching in with Ron Holland, playing that backup power forward. And then Paul Reed, who also had some solid roles with the 76ers in the past. He comes back to the Pistons and plays a pretty solid playoffs. I think he's going to be kind of used within this big man rotation as well, and possibly could be a trade candidate if he does really stand out here in Detroit with their influx of bigs with Durant, Stewart, and Reed. So ultimately, when breaking down the Pistons, where do I have them in the Eastern Conference after all of this? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have them 4th in the Eastern Conference. Very high, two positions, higher than where they finished last year, as they finished 6th in the Eastern Conference. But clearly, I think they're a playoff team. They were guaranteed to be, due to the fact that the East got weaker a little bit this year with the Celtics and Pacers losing their 2-star players, but also with the Pistons being that young, fresh team. And I'm going to keep beating the dead horse here when saying this, but we have seen with these last couple of seasons that pace is key. The Pacers and Thunder, two young teams that play with high, fast pace, made the NBA Finals, and I see the NBA going in this direction. And the Pistons play with that fast pace, led by Cade Cunningham, led by one of those younger point guards that understands the flow of the offense and knows how to control his own team. And I do think with the internal development, like I've said, internal growth of Asor Thompson, hopefully Jaden Ivey, Jalen Durant, Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland, Bobby Klintman, Chaz Lanier, Marcus Sasser, we can see this Pistons team really take that leap on both sides. Now, ultimately, their additions weren't really that great, so you do have to believe on the internal growth. Some of these teams underneath them do have some other pieces that maybe couldn't really past them. I do think the Hawks and Pistons can kind of go back and forth really on where you do think they fall. But if this is what we get for a playoff series, Pistons versus Hawks, regardless of who is 4 versus 5, I think that's a perfect series. Cade Cunningham versus Trae Young. You got a solid defensive team in the Pistons versus a solid offensive team in the Atlanta Hawks. I think that would be a beauty on our screens for 7 games that would have every fan interested, because it's two teams that also haven't been big playoffs teams for the last couple years. The Pistons have been in the gutter the last couple of seasons, trying to claw their way out. Last year, finally making the playoffs after a big drought. And the Hawks, we all saw them make the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021. Thought they were going to take a rise, but have seemingly looked mid and taken a fall down the grace of earth now. So with them getting all these big acquisitions, I think it would be great to see that. Ultimately, though, like I said, Pistons coming in at 4th, I think is going to be a great team this year. One of my more exciting teams to watch going into the season here with Cade Cunningham. I think he is going to be absolutely electric, and I won't lie, I'm a huge Ron Holland fan, so I want to see him take that leap within this team as well. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Pistons, at the deadline, if they are doing good, combine some of these contracts and make another splash to go out and kind of climb up this East even more. So once again, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. It was a 23-minute episode here today talking about the Pistons. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. As like I said, we're going over every single team here before the start of the season. And the season is right around the corner, starting this week on Tuesday. So we'll have a lot of episodes coming out. But then once those episodes do come out, I want to let you know that we will have videos coming up here on the channel. Maybe not every single day, similarly to how I've been doing these offseason breakdowns, but I will be having videos at least throughout the season with some guests, without some guests, talking about the NBA, specific teams, players, etc. So if you want to stay tuned and hear about that stuff, hit the subscribe button. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. I really do appreciate all your love and support here on the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.